Well, hey, Lakeview family and friends, welcome to today's dose of midweek medicine. So as we enter our fifth week of a lockdown lifestyle, and we begin to ponder the long-term impact on when will life ever go back to normal, we're confronted with living a life that we didn't design, we didn't build, we didn't script, and we didn't sign up for. No one's responding with, finally that pandemic has arrived. This is when our word of the week kicks in for us. The word endurance. Today in our Western world and our technological civilization, we're used to things happening quickly, things going our way, things are solvable. Somehow there's a gadget out there that'll fix things. We'd all rather pay a few extra dollars and get the Disney Fast Pass than wait in line. We just don't do waiting very well, right? But did you know that the Bible actually says a lot about endurance? It seems that God was very aware that our pace, our expectations would often be out of line with His pace and His purpose. Thus, God installed this word endurance, right? Let's have a listen here. Hebrews chapter 10, verse 36. We mentioned this the other day. For you have need of endurance, so that when you have done the will of God, you may receive what is promised, right? You have need of endurance so that when you've done the will of God. So God knew that there were going to be moments when doing His will was going to involve enduring, right? God had things that He wanted to get done. God was going to accomplish something in and through human lives. But He knew that we would feel like this isn't happening fast enough, or why is this taking so long? And God knew, install the word endurance. Now remember, Hebrews was written to a group of people who were facing their own situation, that feel like everything was going wrong, and they had their own set of difficulties and fears that they had to work through in their lives. So to them, God says, you have need of endurance in order to fulfill the will of God. And then this is what God says in Hebrews chapter 12, verse 1 and 2. These are great little verses just for you to spend a little bit of time in, just meditating on, to get some things into your heart right now. God says, therefore, verse 1, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and sin which clings so closely, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before Him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God. All right, so listen, the Bible makes clear there is this race that is set before us, and it is apparently an endurance race, just not a quick sprint through things. And I think it's worth noting that we don't get to pick the race that we run, right? These are races that are set before us. And the race that God has for us in our day as individuals, as a local church, as husbands and wives, as citizens of a nation, of people in careers, and maybe you're a young person still going to school, God has set a race before each of us. And that may not be exactly what we had hoped for or what we had scripted, right? If I got to write my own script of my own race, I probably would write a lot of things differently, but I don't. God is the one setting the race before me, and it's going to be at His pace and not necessarily at mine. So what's God's response in a moment like that? Well, it's to normalize the word endurance, to act as though it's not wrong or even strange when people have to face delay or continue for a long season through difficulty. Then he points out examples of that, right? Hebrews chapter 12 says that we are surrounded by a great cloud of witnesses. All these folks that get mentioned in chapter 11, they all had to run races of endurance so that they could fulfill the purpose of God in their day. Now listen, maybe on another episode we'll get into some of their stories, but even what gets mentioned here in chapter 12 as it starts out, that Jesus Christ himself lived a life that required endurance. So I know it may not be an attractive word, but right now, 5 weeks in, impatience is probably going to start settling in for us. Low tolerance for this. Enough already. There's got to be a way to solve this thing. That's going to begin to fill the air and fill our own hearts. Let us embrace the notion that some of the great things that God is doing to bring his kingdom to earth, isn't that what we pray for? God, let your kingdom come and your will be done. And he's doing that. And maybe it's just not happening at the pace or the way in which we would prefer. But listen, God's up to something right now. And some of the things that God is doing, maybe it's in your children. Maybe it's in your spouse or in your boss. In the normal places of life, not just during a COVID-19 moment, all these things involve endurance so that we eventually see the glory of God's purpose in the race that he has set before us. So in this COVID-19 moment, let us befriend endurance so that on the other side of that, amidst all that God is doing on a global scale to bring his kingdom to earth, we might see his will done. We'll see you next time.